Winning a green card through marriage is considered by many to be the fastest and easiest path to becoming a permanent resident. In general, that's true, but there are requirements and there are obstacles to winning a green card, even in that situation. And if this is your second marriage, or if this is your spouse's second marriage, there are more than the usual obstacles. In many situations, folks who are in their second marriage and perhaps they have tried before to immigrate someone, or they themselves have tried to become a permanent resident and failed, they think the second marriage is an easy street. The marriage is more solid. They're getting along with their spouse. Everything seems smooth. And so individuals start to think that getting the green card through a second marriage is easy. There's a song, a popular song from several years ago by a group named Shalimar. And basically the song said, the second time around is better than the first time. Excuse my singing. Be that as it may, to the person, to the couple, it may not be the same for immigration officials. In fact, immigration officials tend to see second marriages very differently. My mother had a saying growing up, and when asked about the difference between jam and jelly, she would say, it must be jam because jelly doesn't shake like that. Well, when you look at second marriages, you might think your case is like jelly. It's more solid, solid as a rock. Oh, there I go again. You don't want me to sing. But that your situation is more firm because your marriage is built on a more solid rock. You've been married 10 years now in the second marriage. You have 3 children. You and your spouse have bought a home. And the children are going to a good school. So you think, well, my case is like jelly. It's firm. Well, the government perceives it more like jam. It's shaky for the simple fact that there was a first marriage and there was an attempt to win a green card that wasn't successful. Or maybe even it was successful. And the government still has questions about it. And that's the problem. Second marriages open the door to re-scrutinize the first marriages. Hi, I'm Carlos Petrara, immigration attorney. Today, we're briefly going to explore the issue of remarriages and permanent residency. And this is if you're seeking a green card to immigrate somebody and it's their second attempt or even third attempt, or you're trying to get a green card and you've been married once or twice or 3 times, and now you're trying to get a green card for the second time. In particular, I want to explore 3 situations. Here's the first situation. Wife A marries husband A. It doesn't work out. Wife A tries to immigrate husband A, but before that process can be completed, the couple divorces. So husband A does not get his green card. Years later, wife A remarries. And when she remarries, she again marries an immigrant. So now wife A is trying to immigrate husband B, also an immigrant. The big issue here is whether the previous marriage was terminated, ended in a legal manner. I've seen cases where individuals have come to my office. They went to their interview, trying to immigrate their second spouse. They go to the interview and they find out that the documents of their first divorce were not completed correctly, or that the seals and the certificates from their country are not the type that's really used in their country. And so they don't have a valid divorce. I've also seen situations where individuals come to me, they go to an interview thinking they're going to immigrate their spouse, and what they find out is that their first divorce, even here in the United States, isn't valid. And then when they go looking for their old spouse to see what happened, they can't find that spouse. And that's because usually one or two things happens. They didn't play an active role in the divorce. And so both parties, maybe this is one of those hostile divorces, they don't want to talk to each other. And so they walk away thinking it's over. We went to court, we filed the papers. Well, the papers may not have been filed correctly. The same thing happens sometimes when lawyers are involved. They think the lawyers filed the final paperwork, but because they've never had that final discussion with the parties, it was never submitted to the court. And so this person now trying to immigrate an immigrant in their second marriage can't do it because their first marriage wasn't ended properly. What happens in those situations is that the immigrant spouse in the second marriage now becomes exposed to deportation. They'll receive a letter from the government, USCIS, saying that they lost their case and that they're going to be referred to immigration court because they are here unlawfully and therefore they should leave the country or face deportation charges at immigration court. Now, probably the most famous case of someone violating this rule of proper termination of marriage was a case where a woman named Liana Barrientos married 10 individuals. Imagine, how did that happen? I don't know how that happened. 9 of them within a 3-year period. I don't know if the spouses knew of each other, but she was just marrying people. But anyway, eventually she got caught, and I'm assuming all 10 of those individuals got deported. Why? Because their marriages weren't real. But even so, you can't marry a second person if you're still married to the first person. When you do it deliberately, of course, that's bigamy. But when you don't do it deliberately, unknown, you could still be charged with bigamy. But usually what this does is cause a real problem for the second spouse when the second spouse now thinks they're going to be getting a green card and the government says, no way, no go. Situation number 2. Again, you have the first set of spouses. You have husband and wife. Wife sets out to immigrate her husband. And in this case, the husband actually wins a green card. Then the couple splits up. They don't get along, they split up. Maybe it's been a year after, maybe a year and a half afterwards. The husband, or it could be the wife, leaves the country. The spouse leaves the country. It could be a husband or a wife. The situation, the law is the same either way. And they just need time to chill out, cool down a little. So they go home just to relieve themselves psychologically. And while there, they meet an old boyfriend, an old girlfriend, an old flame. And they start to rekindle that relationship. And what happens is shortly afterwards, that person, the permanent resident now, decides to, wait a minute, I want to be with you. Let's get married. So they get married. Now the permanent resident says, I want to bring you into the United States with me. And they seek to immigrate them. And it could happen even here in the United States. Let's say the old boyfriend's already living in a different state and they bump into him, or the old girlfriend's living in a different state and they bump into them. So they immigrate. They seek out to immigrate them. Well, the rule is that if that person received their permanent resident card less than 5 years before they try to immigrate another person, they're going to fall into the ring of suspicion. Now, there's an easy way out of that one. You prove that the first marriage was legitimate, but you also have to prove that the second relationship is legitimate. But because of the 5-year rule, the standard's going to be a little higher in terms of your evidence. Now, in the third situation, and this is where there's some really, really big problems, is where the first wife marries the first husband. Then they break up. They separate. They divorce. The first husband, being the immigrant, doesn't get the green card. And as I said, that first spouse could be a female, so it applies either way. So in the second marriage, now it's the husband, the immigrant, who remarries. So he has a new wife, a new U.S. citizen wife. And that wife says, wait a minute, okay, I should immigrate you. But they might take their time. Maybe they're together 3-4 years. They raise a family. They combine their funds together. Everything looks good. So they finally decide to file the immigration papers. At the interview, they're questioned by the government officer. After, they get a letter from immigration, a notice of intent to deny or a request for more evidence. And those letters say, in essence, that there's a suspicion of marriage fraud in the immigrant's first marriage. Now, this is where divorce papers could come in very handy. But again, when people split up quickly and they don't pay attention to what's really in the divorce papers, they can cause problems for themselves. Or if you have feuding lawyers and they're just throwing nasty allegations at each other in the divorce case. And I have a video on that, hostile divorces. You really need to be careful about that if you're in that situation. So they're throwing nasty allegations and charges at each other. Well, then the record's going to look bad. And so when the government's suspecting all of a sudden that this might be fraud, the divorce papers aren't going to help the immigrant in the second case prove that, wait a minute, my first marriage was legitimate. There's different ways that this happens. I've seen cases where the government looks at the case because of certain red flag issues. There's cultural differences, age differences, educational differences, and they question the couple. They issue a request for evidence after the interview or a notice of intent to deny, like I said, and the couple just says, forget it, I won't deal with it. And they don't answer it. And so later on, the immigrant goes on into the second marriage, and they want to seek a green card through the second marriage, but never responding to those allegations in the first case really harms them. I've seen instances where people come to me in the second marriage, and the government says, clearly the second marriage, no problem with that. But the first marriage, there was a marital fraud. Why? Because on the day of the interview, the parties were arguing. They were bickering, they were fighting as they're waiting to go inside the interview. And then inside the interview, one party says to the other, I don't love you, or I don't care. And the government takes that as an indication that there's a fraud going on. And again, because it's hostile, the parties don't try to respond, neither one. When they get a letter from the government, when the wife gets a letter from the government saying the petition is going to be denied because we suspect fraud, she doesn't care. She's angry at her husband. And so she lets it go. Years later, when that husband remarries and he goes forward with the second spouse, they say, wait a minute, your first marriage was invalid. It was a fraud. We suspect fraud. I've seen cases where the spouse is distracted. They went to their interview and something happened. A car accident of a family member or a child getting in trouble, and the news is coming to them. And instead of canceling that interview and saying, can we set it up for another day? Something's come up. They're not concentrating, and their answers are horrible. And because their answers are horrible, that the officer interviewing them thinks, well, they're not really a couple. They must be living apart. We got a problem. And I've had individuals come to me again after the fact where the citizen is trying to immigrate the immigrant, and it's the immigrant's second marriage. And at the interview, of course, the immigrant is denied. They're saying marriage fraud. And when you dig into the records, what happened was in that first interview, there was an indication that the first spouse the first husband had multiple spouses, or had a second spouse, or had a second relationship that he hadn't revealed to the other spouse. And so this spouse then goes into a second marriage thinking, well, I did nothing wrong. Hey, we lost because my husband was cheating on me. Well, immigration fraud to the government. That's a suspicion of immigration fraud. And then you have to fight through it and say, wait a minute, I'm the innocent party. But because those records were never challenged, what happens is the government in the second marriage then thinks that the immigrant spouse committed fraud. And overcoming those cases are difficult. I will almost always recommend, allow me to contact your first spouse. If it's a hostile divorce, usually the immigrant spouse will say, no, I don't want to contact them. And I will persist, because that's the best evidence. The best evidence is to respond and say, you know what? Yeah, we got mad and we didn't respond, but there's no way it wasn't a real marriage. It was a real marriage. Okay. And I would venture to say that 3/4 of the time I can get that kind of statement out of the other spouse. So that should always be the first line of response. Talk to in-laws, ex-in-laws that were part of that family, that first family, that spent Christmases together, Thanksgiving together, birthday parties, special events. That's good evidence. And then, of course, financial records and rent receipts and mortgage receipts and utility bills. I've had where the couple in the first marriage kept things apart. Okay? They were young, ambitious, but they wanted to keep their assets separately. They didn't want to join them yet. And so when the immigrant spouse, who didn't get a green card in that first marriage, now is in the second marriage and there's a suspicion of marriage fraud, there's none of those documents to try to bring into the record. That's where it's going to be crucial to talk to the first spouse, to help explain why they didn't join more assets, why they didn't join more debts, why things were so separated. Otherwise, the government's going to think that the immigrant spouse is just making this up. So in those cases, it becomes very, very hard to overcome what is known as the marital bar. Then once that is tagged on a person, once that's tagged on an immigrant, it's really difficult to surmount it. It's almost impossible in my mind for individuals to fight it on their own, unless they're really, really good detectives and they know how to put together a strong case. But in general, second marriages, green cards through second marriages can be very difficult to obtain because they lead to problems. And I hope this video helped explain some of those problems so that if you run into any of those, you know right away to seek professional assistance because you want that second marriage to work. It's working. Otherwise, you wouldn't be applying for a green card. And so you want the second time around to be better than the first time. But it's going to take work on your part, and you need to be careful. And I wish you and your spouse and your family, your second spouse, your second family, maybe your third spouse, maybe your third family, the best of luck going forward. I hope that you're able to overcome what other obstacles the government places in your path, and that you live together forever after happily in the United States with all the privileges and benefits of living here. Take care. Bye. Thanks for watching. Know someone who might be interested in this video? Then please take a moment to like and share it with them. Also, if you would like more videos on immigration, just click on the subscribe button. And here's a little bonus, a short guide that you can download for free by clicking on the link on the description box or the square-shaped image. Plus, if you have ideas for videos you'd like to see, write a short comment below or feel free to contact me at carlos@VitaraImmigrationLaw.com. My name is Carlos Vitara. I appreciate your time and hopefully we'll be talking again very, very soon.